army of over 100,000 men marches on a Roman settlement. In front of them rides a Celtic warrior queen. Her name is Boudica, and in the next few hours she would oversee the annihilation of nearly everyone left in the city. To the Romans it was a massacre. To Boudica and her people it was justice. But how did the tribal queen from the edge of the empire become the face of Britain's greatest rebellion against Rome? Let's go back to where it all began. Rome controls most of the known world, including southern Britain. But the island remained unstable. The native Celtic tribes still remembered their freedom. And unlike Rome, they sometimes placed women in positions of real power, as priestesses, advisors, and occasionally as rulers. Boudica was part of the Iceni tribe. She was married to King Prasutagus, whose kingdom had made a treaty with Rome. They would pay tribute, and in exchange Rome would leave them alone. We know surprisingly little about her early life. Her name meant victory in the Celtic language. They had 2 daughters. For years they lived in what passed for peace in occupied Britain. But that peace was built on a treaty between Rome and Prasutagus. And Prasutagus was getting old. After years of uneasy peace, King Prasutagus passed away. In his will, he left 1/3 of his kingdom to his daughters. But Roman law didn't recognize women as legal heirs in the way Celtic law did. The moment news of his death reached the Roman administration, procurators soon headed for Iceni territory. The soldiers came and took everything. The gold, the grain, the horses, and even the nobles were taken as slaves. When Boudica resisted and refused to move, they dragged her into a public square to humiliate her. They tied Boudica to a pillar in her own village. Roman soldiers hold their daughters nearby, forcing them to watch. The procurator watches from the side with his arms crossed. He's here to make a point. The flogging of the widow isn't even the worst part. When they're done with her, they take her daughters inside the great hall. The entire village can hear them screaming as they were violated by Roman soldiers. And no one moves, no one fights back, because Rome had made it very clear what happens to those who resist. When it's over, Boudica lies in the dirt, her back shredded, her daughters scarred forever, and the Romans left, satisfied they've made their statement. But humiliation doesn't always break people. Something inside her refuses. Boudica gets up slowly. Her daughters help her up, and she looks around at her people, families who've spent decades bending to Rome, paying their taxes, keeping their heads down, believing that obedience would keep them safe. But instead, it made them targets. She remembers something now. At her husband's funeral, a Trinovantes chief had pulled her aside. He told her of Roman soldiers committing atrocities in the south. She'd listened but said nothing. She was a widow trying to protect what little her daughters had left. She realizes this wasn't just about her tribe. Rome was doing this everywhere, to everyone, and no one was stopping them. Within days, Boudica and her daughters are traveling from tribe to tribe, rallying them to her cause. She doesn't give speeches about freedom or glory, she just tells them what happened. What the Romans did to her and her daughters, what they'll do to anyone who resists or has something they want. The answer comes fast. The Trinovantes, led by the same chief from the funeral, join first. Then the Coritani, who still remember the day Roman soldiers destroyed their temple. They all join, everyone who's been told to stay quiet and be grateful to Rome. Tens of thousands of warriors pour in from across the region, bringing weapons, supplies, and rage that's been boiling for years. These tribes have been enemies before. The Iceni and the Trinovantes fought over borders. The Coritani traded with some and warred with others. But Rome gave them something they never had: a common enemy. Boudica doesn't even have to convince them. She just points them in the right direction, south, toward Camulodunum, the oldest Roman settlement in Britannia, where veterans live in luxury on land stolen from the Trinovantes, where they built a massive temple to the dead Emperor Claudius, the man who brought the legions across the sea, a reminder that Rome owns this island. The locals were forced to pay for it and worship there. It wasn't just a settlement, it was a symbol. Boudica's army moves fast. No banners, no formal ranks, just a flood of people who've decided they'd rather fight than live under tyranny. The settlement has no walls. The 9th Legion is stationed far to the north. The governor, Suetonius Paulinus, is off conquering the island of Mona, hunting druids. But these men fought in the invasion 17 years ago. They've seen Celtic warriors run from them. They've been given land as a reward. Farms, villas, slaves. This is their retirement. Who could possibly dare to stand up against Rome? Before Boudica's forces even arrived, something strange started happening in Camulodunum. There were omens. The statue of victory in the temple precinct fell from its pedestal. Women in the town began having visions, screaming prophecies of destruction. At night, people heard wailing coming from the empty theater. The Romans dismiss it as superstitious nonsense from nervous Britons. But then, news arrived: an army of tribal warriors, tens of thousands of them, was coming. They sent desperate messages to Londinium begging for help, but the procurator only sent 200 lightly armed men. It was all he could spare. So they did the only thing they could. They fortified the temple of Claudius and barricaded themselves inside. Veterans, families, children, and whatever food and water they could carry. Some of the men are in their 50s. Their armor doesn't fit anymore. But they were legionaries once. They know how to hold a position. But then, Boudica arrives. Iceni, Trinovantes, Coritani. A massive flood, 120,000 strong, according to Roman records. There were only about 40,000 Roman soldiers in all of Britannia at this time, and most of them were hundreds of miles away. They don't stop to negotiate or demand surrender. They immediately charge and demolish Camulodunum. The Romans who didn't make it to the temple are dragged from their homes and executed in the streets. The Britons who'd been living peacefully alongside them, they don't get mercy either. Inside the temple, the defenders can hear it, the screaming, the warriors, and the city being torn apart. They held out for 2 days, praying to Jupiter, Mars, and the deified spirit of Claudius himself. But then, Boudica's forces broke through, and what happened next was a slaughter. Modern archaeology confirms the horror. Excavations have revealed a layer from this exact period, with evidence of intense fire, collapsed buildings, and human remains that were never properly buried. The city was so thoroughly destroyed that it had to be rebuilt completely. But Boudica wasn't finished, because she heard that the 9th Legion was coming for her. Quintus Petilius Cerealis is marching south with roughly 2,500 men. He'd heard what happened at Camulodunum and wanted to crush the rebellion before it spread. But Boudica doesn't retreat or dig in. Instead, she moves to meet him. She ambushes them near Camulodunum. According to Roman records, most of the infantry was lost. Cerealis barely escaped with the cavalry, fleeing back north whilst infantry got massacred on the road. A Roman legion had been defeated by what Rome called barbarians. This wasn't just a tribal rebellion anymore, this was military competence. and word spread fast. People who'd spent years cooperating with Rome started picking up weapons. Boudica's army kept growing, and soon she decided to turn south toward the commercial center of the province, Londinium. Governor Suetonius was still hundreds of miles away in Wales. The 2nd Legion in Exeter wouldn't respond to his orders, and somewhere between him and the smoking ruins of Camulodunum was an army that outnumbered him completely. He hurried back and reached Londinium first, but when he saw its indefensible position and the size of Boudica's approaching army, he ordered evacuation. But many refused to leave. Some didn't believe the danger was real. Others had nowhere to go. Tens of thousands stayed behind. When Boudica arrived, she showed no mercy. Her army moved door to door, street by street. Anyone left behind was hunted down. The fires started immediately. Warehouses, docks, homes. The Thames turned orange from the flames. Archaeologists found a layer of red ash beneath modern London. The fire was so intense, so all-consuming, that it changed the chemical composition of the ground. Boudica knew there was no going back. This ended with either Rome leaving Britannia or her people destroyed. Only days later, she struck again. Verulamium, a city full of Britons who'd adopted Roman ways. To her, they were traitors. The city burned just like the others. 3 cities erased in a matter of weeks. Tacitus claims 70,000 people died, more Roman civilians than any enemy had managed in decades. She'd accomplished what Germanic tribes and countless other enemies of Rome had failed to do. She made Emperor Nero himself consider withdrawing from Britain. But Governor Suetonius was still out there, assembling his legions, and the deciding battle was coming. Scouts report where the Romans are assembling. Suetonius has pulled together 2 legions with about 10,000 men. Boudica's army, now possibly over 200,000 strong according to Roman records, marches north to meet them. When they arrived, the Romans had chosen the perfect defensive position. A narrow valley sloped upward, with trees pressing in on both sides. A classic Roman strategy to negate enemy numbers. Boudica rides along the line. She reminds them what Rome did, what they did to her daughters. She tells them this is their chance. One more battle and Britannia is theirs. Her warriors are roaring, beating their weapons against their shields. But the Romans don't react. They just stand there. The families had pulled their wagons up behind the British line, forming a semicircle. They want to witness the moment Boudica defeats Rome. Then she gives the signal. Thousands of warriors charge into the valley. No formation, just a massive wave running toward the Roman line. They wait until the warriors are halfway up. Then the javelins fly, thousands of them. Warriors go down in clumps, trampled by the ones behind them. They crash into the shield wall, but the valley is too narrow, only a fraction can fight at once. Then the Romans start pushing forward, forcing the warriors to retreat. But here's where disaster turned to catastrophe. They were blocked by their own supply train. The people trampled each other. Families who'd come to celebrate victory perished in the panic. The Romans showed no mercy. They take out everyone, warriors, civilians, it doesn't matter. But what happened to Boudica herself? Decades later, Tacitus claimed she took poison shortly after the battle, choosing death over capture. Cassius Dio claimed she fell ill and died and was given a lavish burial. We don't know which is true. We don't know where she's buried. What we do know is that the Celtic warrior queen vanished. But was it really defeat? Rome's response was brutal at first. Suetonius began massacring anyone suspected of supporting the rebellion. But then something unexpected happened. News of the revolt had reached the Emperor Nero in Rome, along with reports of Suetonius' tactics, and Nero chose to change strategy. He recalled Suetonius and sent a new governor to restore order without further provocation. The Celtic tribes were to be treated as subjects, not slaves. The 3 cities she destroyed were rebuilt, but with actual defenses and more respect for the local customs. The most exploitative Roman practices were quietly discontinued. Boudica may have lost the war, but her rebellion changed Roman policy. Today, a statue of Boudica stands near Westminster Bridge in London, and archaeology continues to uncover evidence of her rebellion in the burned layers beneath the rebuilt cities. History doesn't remember most of the Roman procurators who ordered the flogging and stole their land, but it remembers her name, Boudica, victory. The next episode takes us from ancient Britain to the barbaric coast of North Africa. For 300 years, corsairs raided European ships and coastal towns, enslaving over 1 million people. In 1816, a British-Dutch fleet, led by Admiral Edward Pellew, sailed into Algiers with one mission: to end it. What do you think? Was Boudica a freedom fighter, or did she go too far? And if Boudica had won the final battle, would she have governed differently than Rome? Let me know in the comments.